Then we're going to go into the next phase of the selection process, which is going into refining the selection using this thing called select and mask. This is where you're going to be spending a lot of your time in Photoshop getting the select and mask part correct because it takes time. It takes time and some finesse and some practice with knowing when you've gotten what you want out of it and you don't need to go any further. So let's take a look at what we're going to be working on and playing with. Let me make sure that our screen is being shared properly. Yes, it is. So let's go file to open here. And we're going to open up this picture called Badu TC. This picture here is a pretty nice picture of Miss Erica Badu, a R&B singer or soul singer, and a great voice, wonderful woman. I got stories of meeting her and that sort of thing, and it was fun. At the time, when before she is as big as she is now, as popular as she is now, I met her when she was a fledgling, just coming out with her music, and that was a very fun and uh, experience. Now, this picture was taken at I think this was Montreux Jazz Festival. Um, we need her selected. We don't need anything else. We need her, the microphone stand, and the microphone cord. Now, if you look at this picture, as far as contrast is concerned, her hair, her skin tone is a pretty good high contrast against everything surrounding her. But when you start getting into her dress, start getting to the microphone stand, the microphone cord. The microphone stand is kind of high contrast against the background and even against her skin. But when you look at the cord and look at the microphone, now that contrast is getting a little lower. Even her outfit. If you were trying to make a selection of her belt over her dress, it's kind of low contrast. It's not really that high. So you got to be careful when choosing your different selection tools from the start and then when it comes to refining things, when it comes to like hair, with her hair the way it is, it's not going to be a real quick selection with any of these selection tools that we've gone over so far. You're going to have to go into the refinement to make that a better thing than what you have. So what I want to do is I want to start first with this object selection tool, and then the options bar here. I want to make a new selection with that new selection modifier button. I want to click on this little gear icon to make sure object finder is turned on. Lasso is my mode choice because I like that. And I want to uncheck hard edge in this case because things like the hair don't need to have a hard edge selection around it. So I just want to see how this is going to work. And then lastly, right next to select subject, I'm going to hit that drop down and make sure cloud is selected if I can. If I'm connected to the internet, that would work. And then what I should be able to do is see, I can go over pretty much all of her is one object. So I can click once and add that in as a selection. So got to give it a little bit of time. Instead of getting the beach ball to death, I get the little things spinning around. But it does a pretty decent job going around her arm, going around the microphone stand. It doesn't quite get the last of the cord coming down because that contrast is just not working. And really, no matter what you do, you'll have a hard time trying to get that picked out. So why even try? In the selection. Now that works pretty fast. Does a pretty decent job. Let's look at another option for this. And this is under the select menu, and it's also same option that one of the options that will show up in some of these selection tools in the option bar. It's a thing called select subject. Select subject works real well when the thing that you want to select is the most prominent thing in the picture. So she's the most prominent thing in this picture, along with possibly the microphone stand. But the bald headed guy down there in the corner, he's not very prominent, so he should not be part of the selection when I do select subject. Um, in the options bar, with some of these selection tools, you'll see select subject as a button that you can click on. It does the same thing as if you go to the select menu and you choose subject here. I just like to go here first to show you that's there in the menu bar. So that way, if you don't see it in the options bar, you can always go up here to find it. When you do select subject, you're letting the computer, with its AI feature, figure out what's supposed to be the selection. If you already had a selection up, it would probably prompt you and be like, hey, we're going to have to get rid of this old selection to make a new one. Is that okay? You say yes, you let it do its thing. If you're on that cloud, of course, it'll take a little bit longer, but it tries to get you a more accurate selection. Take notice down here with the microphone, the microphone stand, and the microphone cord. Got a lot more of the microphone cord coming down. It picked up. It got a pretty good job on the mic stand. Got around her eyes. Now right here, this is always a problem with that eye there towards the back because of the angles. It doesn't quite pick up that eye with the eyelashes and all that. So that could be an issue that you may have to solve some other way with the refinement. The hair, it picked out the hair, and it looks like it did a pretty good job of picking the hair out, but it still got some of the background that's behind the hair in the little wispier areas. It added that to the selection too. So we got to look to refine and try to get that rid of that if we can. But it's a very, very good job. Now, however long it takes you to get a complicated selection like this, it's always a good idea to save that selection so you can come back to it on another date and another time. So that process is going to your select menu. Part one of this is going to your select menu and choosing save selection. Now, when you save the selection, what you are saving is a thing called an alpha channel. Don't worry about going down the rabbit hole of that alpha channel just yet. We'll come back in another lecture to talk about that. But you're giving this alpha channel a name. So you're taking your selection, you're saving the selection, you're going to give it a name. Let's say I call it Badu, B-A-D-U. Keep it simple. Hit OK. That's part one. Part two of saving the selection is saving the file. So after you save the selection, you got to save the file as a second step. So this would be file, and in this case, I'm going to do save as. So that way I don't save over top of the original. I'm going to save a brand new file somewhere else, like say on my desktop. That's not on top of the original, and so that way I can go back and do this in another time. Now, what happens is this. Sometime later, you open this file back up. Of course, the marching ants are not going to be there, but you would be able to go to your select menu, and you would be able to choose load selection. And then where it says channel here is going to be the saved selection that you made and that you saved and held on to, that you could pull it back up whenever you need to. All right, so that's the purpose, is being able to make these selections way ahead of time. Maybe you could have just selected the dress. Maybe you could have just selected the hair, just the microphone. Only make those type of selections and then save them. So that way, if you need them, like say you need to change the color of her dress, if you just selected her dress, then it'd be easy to call that selection up later on when it's asked of you to do so and change the color of the dress. And things like that. So that's the purpose of that save selection. And then finally the load selection part. Just happened. All right. Let's move forward from there. So save selection, good idea to do that when you make something kind of complicated selection, no matter how much time you spend on it. You want to save it so that way you can get it, later time. Now we're going to do the next thing with this, and that's a thing called select and mask. So again, depending on the tool that you're using, you'll see select and mask as one of the options up in the options bar, but you can also go to your select menu and choose select and mask from here. Now, depending on the complexity of your subject, depends on how much time you're going to spend in here modifying that selection and refining it and getting it better than what you had. Okay, so here's the process. First thing is over here on the right-hand side of the screen, you want to change your view. Now, my view is set to overlay when I hit the drop down, but you got different types. You got onion skin, which will take the stuff that's not selected and like let it fade down by a certain amount. You got one that's called marching ants, which I don't like because it's like, why? It's not any difference. I like the overlay because I can choose the overlay color as well as the opacity of the overlay. But then you also have on black and on white, which is just a black overlay or a white overlay. So you don't choose the color, but you can choose the opacity of it, how see-through it is. You have black and white, which will just give you a black and white version of your selected and non-selected things. I like coming here to find things that I may have missed, like see on the microphone stand, those little areas there that I missed in there, to kind of clean those up. And then you got on layers, which just basically takes away what is not selected. And this is probably going to be your end goal, is getting this onto its own, on a layer by itself, with it being isolated like this without the background and everything. So I'm going to go with overlay first, because that's the thing that I like the best. Because again, I can change the opacity over the overlay, and then I can change the color of the overlay, so that way I can see uh, anything that's inconsistent or not working. I can see it because I can make the overlay color an opposite color of what I already have. So for instance, I wouldn't make it green, or maybe even gold, or kind of a light golden brown, because then it would clash with the colors that are already here that when I'm trying to select. So I was something like this hot pink color works pretty well. So that way I could see what I got. So that's the first thing that you would do. Set that overlay. Second thing is, now you're going to start using the different tools to try to, get a better selection, or modify the different selections. So the first of the tools here that's in the toolbox on the left is a quick selection tool. So it's like your quick select tool that you had outside of this interface. You have your options bar up here where you have the ability to add or subtract. And we'll talk about the add and subtract in a second. Then you have the size of the brush, where you're just using this little slider to change the size of the brush. Now, you can use your square bracket keys like we did before for the size of the brush. And then this add and subtract part has to deal with the overlay. So with the plus sign, you're adding to your selection, so you're taking the overlay away. All right. With the minus sign, you're taking away from your selection, so you're adding the overlay in. So with the minus sign, you're adding the overlay. With the plus sign, you're taking the overlay away. With the minus sign, you're taking away from your selection. And with the plus sign, you're adding to your selection. Something to get used to. You're going to make the wrong choice at first. You're going to make a mistake. That's fine. You can reverse it by either undoing it, Control Z, or Command Z to undo something that you did, or, fix from there. Now, these tools, like I said, this tool, magnetic, is the magic. It's not the magic wand. It's the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool works like it does anywhere else. Another keyboard shortcut is Control with plus and minus, so you can zoom in and zoom out. And in this program, in this interface, you can zoom in a whole lot closer to different areas of the picture than you could outside of this interface. You can hold down the spacebar key on your keyboard to move the picture around once you're zoomed in, because your cursor turns to a hand. Hold the spacebar down, and then you can click and drag and move around without having to look for scroll bars. This way you can get to an area that's a little closer, get a little closer to it, change the size of your brush with the square bracket keys, and then you can try to click and drag and try to paint in more of whatever was lost, or try to add to what you got in your selection. And that's all I'm doing. I'm just kind of painting down the microphone here, a microphone stand, and trying to paint more and more in without it getting into too much. See what happened there? So when I just grab too much of that background, so I can undo that, Control Z, and either try again, or realize that, no matter what I do, I'm still going to get the same result. So that means I got to stop using this tool, try to go to something else. Something else, uh, two buttons down from that quick select tool, is a regular paintbrush tool. There's like a regular paintbrush, where with this one, same thing with the modifier buttons with the add and subtract. Added to it, when it comes to the brush, you can choose like a hardness of the brush, so you can make it fuzzy, little fuzzy soft transitional, or make it a hard edge brush. Again, with the spacing, you could turn the spacing number down to like 10%, like I do. So this way you get a little bit more of the brush being used a little more often than without. And then you can just start painting something like the microphone stand here in, without getting the rest of the background pulled into play. If oops, I go too far, that's fine. Just switch over to the subtract from selection, or you can hold down the option key or alt key on your keyboard and just paint away where you painted over. You painted too much out and just paint it back in. So that way you could take your time. And this is the part that takes you forever to do. This is where you're going to be going around your subject, trying to find every little flaw and every little piece and part that needs to be added and subtracted from. And this paintbrush tool is the one that's going to take you the longest amount of time trying to get right. Little tip, straight lines, you can do this little thing. You can click on one spot with the brush, then you can hold down your shift key, come down here and click again, and it'll just paint a straight line down. So that works good for like straight lines, horizontal, vertical, at an angle, doesn't kind of matter. If you need to get that straight line painted in, that will do the job. But this part is going to take time, and it's not going to be fast, and it's not supposed to be fast. So take your time with using this paintbrush tool as much as you want to, going around. You'll find all the different areas. Look at this right up here by your eyes. See, our eyes got knocked out. And so you got to do something to try to paint that eye area back in. That's going to be difficult. So, small size brush, small, teeny tiny brush. If you got one of those graphic tablets, like a Wacom tablet or something, this is where that kind of comes in to play, because then you can do some pressure sensitive dynamics with the brush. That may help, may not, but it'll do something. Then comes the fun part, her hair. Now, when you look at her hair there, you can really tell right along the edges how some of the background is coming through the strands of the hair. You don't want that. That's going to look bad when you put her against some other background or anything like that. So now we're going to fix for that. So this is called refining the edge. You first have, which is always a good thing to do, there's a button up at the top in the options bar that's called refine hair. And you still also have that select subject with the drop down choice of choosing cloud or device. Before you hit refine hair, make sure you're on that cloud choice. And when you hit refine hair, sometimes, depending on the picture, it will do the job for you of knocking out that extra background. So you don't have to do it yourself. Sometimes, though, it still doesn't get quite right. Like right here, I don't know if you could see. Let me make my brush size bigger. This little area right in here doesn't quite get rid of that little background back in there. So what I need to do is get that painted out. Now, how do I do that? Well, that's the second button from the top in the toolbar. That's this refine edge brush tool. The way this works, and it's going to be subjective to how you do things. You go up to the options bar, you turn the hardness number down. You don't have to turn it all the way down to 0, but you just turn it down to a low number. You have that spacing there at like 10% or so. Size of the brush you can adjust depending on the area. You want to cover that area where it's like one click or a small click and drag over just the affected area. You're going to have that plus sign. If you make the brush big enough, you'll see that plus sign. I don't know if you could see it well in the video, but I got this plus sign on that background color there in their hair. And I want to start there, because what I want to do is I want to click and drag across that area real fast. And I'm telling the computer, hey, in that space, I want to take that color out of it. All right. So that way I can retain the hair color, but knock out that other background color out of there. That's how you want to do it. Now, here comes the problem. Depending on the wispiness of the hair or the semi-transparent nature of things like smoke or water, you could sometimes get rid of more than you wanted to, where it doesn't look right anymore. That's fine, because you can go back to the paintbrush tool and you could paint some of the information back in. Like sometimes when I do this refine edge or do that refine hair, sometimes there's areas, deeper inside of the hair that get knocked out too. So I can kind of go over that to try to bring some of that information back that may have been lost down towards the base of the head. And as I get towards the edges again, smaller size brush, going with the brush tool to go with the turn the hardness all the way down to 0. So it's a little soft, fuzzy, transitional kind of thing. Try not to go over the same area too many times. Things like that to try to paint over quickly and try to regain some of the strands of the hair that may have gotten lost when the color got knocked out. Things like that to try to bring some of that back. It shouldn't take you long, but the fuzzier your object is, of course, the longer this would probably take to try to get it right. Um, you go through, you take this time, and you go through and try to get as much of this done as possible to make this look as professionally done as possible and look as good as you could possibly get it. You're going to miss some places, but that's okay because you'll be able to come back to this interface later once you realize you missed something.